Ta-da!
Hello, how are you?
Good.
More importantly, where are you that you've actually got internet?
I'm in London.
I thought what we could do is we could start by talking about why we are excited at the idea of having a podcast together.
49.
49, perfect. There's a, I was just about to say there's a big market for the 50 plus on on YouTube.
Well, I'm pretty much
And I thought we could.
there, aren't I? So,
Yeah, and there's not many 50 plus, or let's say 45 plus, 40 plus. There's not many 40 plus podcasts for British people, I don't think. I think most people of that age group traditionally turn to Radio 4 and Radio 2 and places like that for their information, and they might not have got into the YouTube thing so much now, but I notice on YouTube it's a very big growing market, and podcasts, it's the biggest podcast host in the world now. It's even
wow.
overtaken Apple.
Well,
So
YouTube itself.
yeah,
Wow.
YouTube itself is a biggest podcast host.
Okay.
My podcasts do quite well on YouTube. I feed them through from my other podcast host. And by doing it like this, and this has been my issue, finding someone, because I love doing, I did 280 episodes with Judith of Own It, the podcast. And
Remember it.
I absolutely loved it. She absolutely loved it. We just got tired at the end, and it got to the point where we couldn't discuss the things we wanted to discuss because this was early 2020. But I haven't really met anyone since then.
Do you have an iPhone?
Yeah.
We'll put Do Not Disturb on.
Well, I've got no idea how to do that. How do I put Do Not Disturb on?
Easiest way is if you take your screen,
Yeah.
swipe down from the top,
Yeah.
it should come up with a load of settings like
No,
Wi-Fi
it
and
comes up with a load of notifications, messages.
no, you need to do it at the right-hand side.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
Then there'll be a thing in the middle that says focus.
It says focus, yes.
Just click on that and
Do
it'll,
not disturb.
yeah.
Okay.
Then you can just go back in once you've done it to take
Yeah, if you remember. So, do you want to kick off with let's do an introduction then, because you just say who you are, what you do, and how we came to meet each other, and we'll go from there. And I'll do the same, and then we'll talk about what we've been up to this week.
All right, an intro off the
An
cuff.
intro. And don't forget to mention your bed and breakfast, for God's sake.
I'm always really crap at intros. I'll give it a go.
Go on then.
All right, hi everyone. I'm Matthew Moody, and I have the pleasure of being a co-host on this brand new amazing podcast, which I'm particularly stoked about, to be honest, because it's great to be able to talk about like-minded issues with people that get it. Bit about me, from Yorkshire originally, son of a policeman and a housewife, fabulous growing up in Yorkshire. Highly recommend, if you've not been to God's country, you should, because if not, you're missing out. And for my sins, I moved to Oxford to do a degree in theology, which is like, woo, that's a bit strange, but it's one of those things where you kind of get into a situation of doing a particular degree because at the time you're in a culture, a programming, and that's one of the things I'd love to talk about later on is programming because I'm seeing it all the time at the moment. And I went to do a degree in theology because I'd kind of been led down that route and didn't really know what else to do. But anyhow, had a great time in Oxford, as one does. And then went and started working in business, which has got nothing to do with theology whatsoever. So I've been working in business and property since '96. So quite a few years now. And when you look back at it and think of all the changes, the technological marvels that have happened in that time period, it's pretty incredible, to be fair.
Yeah.
I could go on and on about what I've
Well,
done.
how did okay? So that's cool. So how did we meet, and what have we been most recently working on together with great success, I might say. That's that, and then we'll take it from what you've been up to this week. But I'll do my intro first.
How did Nicola and I meet? Well, that's an interesting story. So we know that there's a couple of joint friends who are crazy people, and used to organise the most ridiculous masterminds over in Las Vegas,
Oh
which
God,
is one of those things where you need a holiday to recover from it, and particularly the liver. But yeah, we met at one of these mastermind events, and I'd heard about you, and I think I'd come across you before on the Money Gym or one of your other things that you've done in the past. If I've got that wrong, tell me now.
Yeah, no, Money Jim would be
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
probably.
So I'd heard of your name, but I'd not actually met you before. And we were at this mastermind, which was an insane one. This was one where we went to Liberace's mansion and sat in
Oh,
gold-plated
that was the
clubs.
best one.
We had a desert party in the middle of the desert, going round on like
With real camels.
with real camels and just hurtling across the desert in jeeps. So many things that were happening, and obviously there was, actual mastermind and content, of course, but we kind of interacted over the week, but we didn't really meet me until the last day at the mansion party. And I just thought, I'm just going to go and talk to Nicola. And we sat down and had a really good chat. It's like, why didn't I do this 5 days ago? Because then we could have just been comparing notes across the week. But anyhow, that's how it kind of happened. And
Okay.
we kind of kept in contact since then, because we've been part of I guess, ongoing webinar series, again, hosted by one of our good friends, on rational thinking, which is another interesting
Something
topic.
I'm not known for.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Rational thinking.
Yeah.
Most people don't do it. And most recently, yes, we've been working on a very exciting project, which was when I had stood to become elected to the Houses of Parliament as an MP for Reform UK in my area, Penrith Solway. We've been working on that over the last 6-7 weeks, and it's been absolutely fantastic having someone that actually gets what social media is about, and also understands that it's not just about what you film and put in, which is very important. It's also about how you tag and the words you use to get people to actually look at it in the first place. Because obviously, if you put out the best content in the world, but if there's nothing to engage people and hook them in, it's kind of irrelevant. So yeah, I've been doing that from glorious place in Cumbria, where we also have a very nice bed and breakfast. Well, actually, no, it's more like a self-catered cottage. We do provide actually breakfast materials, and if you come for more than 2 nights, we bake you freshly baked bread and loads of other stuff that you get. So yeah, it's very nice.
What's it called, Matthew?
Lovely. What's it called? Wisteria Lodge at the Gale Estate. So yeah, it's very nice.
And if one was going to go online and look for your lovely website, what would one type in to find it?
Oh, that would be the Gale, Gale, as in windy, because sometimes it can be in winter. Thegale.co.uk.
Yeah. Thegale.co.uk.
Yeah,
that's a nice short one. Well done. When I work with people, it's a bit like I obviously charge a decent amount because I've been at it 28 years, and I've grown up through the writing a website using HTML code, right through Twitter being introduced, social media coming in slowly, So I've learned each platform as it's arrived, and the one that I hadn't learned was TikTok, because I went on it and I thought, oh God, that's so addictive. I cannot go anywhere near that. And so when we started working together, first of all, it was an absolute joy, because you are such a natural at producing content. You can, and not only that, but you can walk across the fens or whatever they're called up in your neck of the woods.
The mountain.
You were mounting the last videos going absolutely bonkers on YouTube because you're walking across beautiful, beautiful mountains and talking about the housing crisis in Keswick at the same time. I don't know how you did that. I was any minute waiting for you to tumble down a cliff or something. It was quite terrifying. And I think that's part of why people are watching so much of it, because it's subliminally quite gripping content because of the element of danger in it. What my sister would call the air of the jeopardy in the whole thing.
I guess it comes from basically going out walking with my parents from the age of about 5, so I don't really have much fear that way. But yes, it was certainly. I know you kept saying, "Oh no, he's going to fall." I was like, "No, I'm all good."
So that was a joy because I know I'm a bit like the plumber who is it the plumber who gets pulled into a nuclear power station and they've got a leak and it's about to blow and they can't work out where it is, and he walks around tapping things, and then after a while he taps one thing and then he sends this monstrous bill, and he said but you only walked around for half an hour and tapped things, and they said, yeah, but I knew where to tap. And that's what
Yeah.
a lot of the social media thing is. It's not just knowing what, you know, I didn't give you any guidance about what to say in your videos. I wouldn't dream it. That's you're the expert. I work with experts generally. So I work with experts. I don't presume to tell them what to do in their content creation or their delivery, because I believe people should be authentic and just be themselves. And you'll very much come across like that. And I think that's why, you know, you resonated with all your local people so much. You did brilliantly on TikTok. We had to chop up the videos often because they were over 5 minutes, but I made parts 1 and part 2. And then the thing about TikTok, we could caption them. So you've got what you're saying running along across underneath you. And a lot of people a lot of people don't realise how well Reform UK did on social media. And they absolutely dominated TikTok, didn't they? I mean, Starmer and Sunak didn't even have TikTok accounts.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in today's world where we're all so socially connected, there is obviously a demographic difference, isn't there? You know, we are from a slightly older generation, shall we say, than some of the listeners that might be listening to this. But then you've also got the other people that so far removed from social media in terms of they just don't do it. They may have a phone and they might be on, say, Facebook, but these other channels that are coming in all the time, it's very difficult for people to keep on top of them. But I think people have to realise that nowadays, the reason why so much information is being shared and gotten out there is because people have a phone and they're filming everything and they're putting it onto these channels. So it's really powerful.
Yeah.
And the stuff you were doing was just, incredible.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it was a joy. You know, you just produced great content and I made sure it got out there in the right format for the right platform. So tell me about reactions you had. Didn't you have some kids come up to you who weren't even going to be voting Reform UK, but they'd seen you on social media?
Well, I had, when I was at the count, and, you know, for those of you who've never been to a count, I wouldn't recommend it. It's very boring. But it starts about 10 in the evening and goes on to whenever they finish counting the votes, which for us was about 3:30 in the morning. But I had some of the guys from the Labour team, who must have been all of about 20 something, come up to me and said, oh, we've been watching you on TikTok. We love your content. And, you know, can you tell us a little bit about, you know, why you stood and, you know, what kind of things you've been doing? So I was having a good little chit chat with them. Yeah. And the interesting thing was that none of the other candidates had any TikTok accounts in my area. Half of the candidate, well, actually only one other candidate had Facebook and X. None of them were doing any YouTube videos. The current now MP hasn't been active on Facebook, which is his only social media platform I'm aware of, in eight or 9 days.
Yeah.
Just absent. And I think people don't realise how important these things are. And whilst we may not have got the result we wanted this time round, you know, the more that we do on social media, the more people get to know about you, because people are.
You'd only just moved to the area as well, hadn't you? So you knew pretty much nobody in the area, and you went from a standing start to however many you were a close third, I believe, and at one point you were sitting second, weren't you? So that's a real achievement.
Half the Tory vote and got that incumbent MP out, which some people may or may not like, but I mean, what have the Tories done for the country, really? And if you're listening to this,
what have the Romans done for the country?
Well, yeah, but what I'm just going to say is, if you listen to this podcast and you're not interested in politics at all, then we're going to talk about politics a bit. We might not talk about it all the time, but it will come up. So don't turn off, because it's all good.
Please don't, because we're both really interested in business and marketing and property and anything. I've got really wide-ranging interests outside all of that. What you know, I'm obsessed with. Might as well tell you now, I'm obsessed with aliens, aliens, and what else am I really interested in? Homesteading. I love the idea of going onto an old bit of land and regenerating it and growing things and growing animals and stuff like that. I mean, whether I'll ever do it is another thing, but I mean, I'm really interested in it. So, what are your interests outside work, business, and politics?
Well, I've always been very interested and involved in music.
Yes.
And, you know, talk about that till the cows come home. As to how much relevance that has in this podcast, I'm not sure, but you can take some very useful tips and insights from what some of the musicians, artists, whatever, are doing out there on the moment in terms of getting attention, because they're very, very good at that. So music definitely, obviously, one of the reasons I moved to Cumbria is to do walking in the mountains, because it's just gives you a very good grounding and resets everything about what might be going on in your head by just getting out into the fresh air. And because I live in the north of Cumbria, which is just outside the national park, there's not that many people around really, in terms of you can go walking on the mountains and maybe meet one or two people. Obviously, if you go into the Lake District National Park, it can become a bit swamped. It's not quite, what is it, Everest, where they're literally queuing up to go up the mountain. It's not quite like that, but it can be sometimes. So definitely walking. And then, I guess I'm just interested in everything that's going on in terms of there's so many different aspects to life. And, I've been reading a lot of stuff recently about the Tartarian kind of empire, which is just mind-blowing. And, I don't know, is it real? Isn't it real? I can't quite make up my mind.
Tartaria, sorry, are you talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely existed. I actually think that we've had several hundred years, if not 1,000 years, wiped out of our history, and that's got to be the time when Tartaria was around. Because I saw something the other day with a guy who had an old dictionary from 1838, I think it was. It was really early in the 19th century. You look up to for Tartaria, it had a full description of what it was.
Yeah.
Oh, that's another interest. That's great.
Very, very, very interesting, isn't it? Are we living?
I think that's.
Are we living in the Matrix, Nicola? That is the question that we have to keep asking ourselves.
I was hoping to ease into that.
Oh, okay. Let's not go there today.
No. Okay, so a rough format, I suggest, subject to change at any time. According to time constraints and interests and things, and also world events, because there's things kicking off every week now, isn't there? Last week being a spectacular example. So what have you been up to the last week? And then we'll go into the first of your topics that you'd like to discuss.
In this last week, I've been catching up on a lot of stuff I've been putting off, to be fair, because running this campaign that I'd been doing, it was so intensive. It was
short notice too, wasn't it?
Difficult to do any other work, really. So it's been more of a catch-up week. I have been spending quite a bit of time actually this week, funnily enough, which is one of the topics I wanted to talk about, looking at mindset and reading and listening to some stuff just to kind of reset the mind in terms of, essentially I've exited from, a very intense 6-week almost sprint in terms of to do something, to get somewhere, and everything else I just put to one side. So now I'm just going back in and effectively recalibrating everything and looking at where do I need to go next and what do I need to do in terms of from a mindset perspective. Interesting when you start doing that people start reaching out to you and opportunities come. So I'm actually been having some very interesting conversations at the moment with a good friend of mine who I haven't seen for some time, but used to do some dealings with in the property world, and he reached out to me about a huge kind of wellness, sustainable living ecosystem thing that he's creating over in Zanzibar, and that's been really interesting. Yeah, we've just been like trading voice notes on stuff and his kind of thoughts on where they're going, and my response back to them, and they're all a kind of startup funding level, but they have a huge amount of land that they've acquired and an island and so on and so forth. So that's been really cool. Why I have a slightly croaky voice is because I was in London last night for a kind of reunion of a membership platform that I'm in that was celebrated 7 years running.
Nice.
And I got in very late.
So you're staying in a hotel, and did you all go out for dinner, or did you just stay in the hotel and have a drink?
No, it was started off at the Alchemist on cocktails, and then went to this place in Shoreditch, which is called like Bali something. I can never remember the name. It's basically it's a huge kind of place that has they have massive ball pits and karaoke in and stuff. So it's for adults.
Yeah.
So yeah, they had like food there and drinks and so on and so forth,
Yeah.
and sang
Nice.
too loudly and all that good
So
stuff.
I think you were saying that there were a few people in your group who are not quite as awake as you are to what's
Oh,
going on in the
absolutely,
world.
absolutely. And I think this is the interesting thing, isn't it? When you start talking to people and you start asking them questions, you realise that they clearly have no clue about anything because they just say something. So, for those in Britain, that are aware of, say, Reform UK, the name Nigel Farage is obviously attached to that because he is currently our leader. And Nigel Farage is very much Marmite. Some people love him, some people hate him. But
Mainly because of the misinformation the mainstream press has spread
well,
about
this is it. And I'm just talking generally about what I
him.
was
Yeah.
doing as my campaign, and people are just writing you off. They're just saying, "Oh, Farage, racist," or Farage this, or Farage this. And I said, "Hang on a minute." So he's one person and he's our leader, yes. And you may or may not like him, that's fine. I said, but where are you getting this information from? And they couldn't really answer that. I just said, some news reports. And, then I said, well, you know, all voted a certain way. And, they just start talking about stuff that they have no knowledge of. So I ask questions such as, well, do you know what we would have done with income tax, for instance? No. Do you know what we would have done corporation tax? No. So effectively, you've got this situation where millions of people, and it is millions, have been voting for something that they have no knowledge of, no understanding of what the policies are, but they voted for them because they were programmed to do. And it's one of the topics I was kind of bringing to the table this week in terms of the programming that goes on our daily lives everywhere we go. And you can choose to accept it and go with it, or you can choose to maybe question it and ask yourself, well, is there alternatives and can I go and explore those myself? And yeah, it was just a very interesting conversation. Certainly one person who was very much like this. There was
Yeah.
another person that was slightly leaning towards that kind of left side of politics. But to their credit, they'd gone and looked at all the different policies and manifestos of their local
Wow.
people standing, and she voted a different way to which they would normally have voted. And all credit to someone that does that because they've taken the time and trouble to go and look at something, and whether you agree with their decision or not, the fact they've taken the time and trouble means that you can actually have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
Whereas someone that you're talking to and you're just written off as soon as you open your mouth. And for someone to turn around to me and say, "Oh, the BBC has a right-wing bias,"
What?
what? This is coming from a Labour supporter. I just,
Yeah.
I couldn't understand it.
Intervention. And then now her sister's just been, literally 2 years later, her sister's just been hospitalized and put in a coma for 3.5 weeks and she was intubated, which involves having a tracheotomy. But the thing I was quite shocked by was that as soon as you're intubated and put on a ventilator, they start pumping fentanyl and ketamine into you. And the side effect of that is that you have absolutely horrendous dreams while you're actually intubated. So everybody wakes up and has to have some sort of psychiatric support to cope with the dreams they've been having. That's if they do wake up, because we know that ventilation is only a 50% success rate. But she was telling me all this, and I was sitting in the hairdresser's chair thinking, I can't believe that. And this woman, to be fair, fought off the ventilator as soon as they start reducing the drugs and bringing you round a little bit. Then you get longer and longer periods of time to try to breathe yourself. I mean, it must be the most horrific experience. I can't imagine it. And she got off about 2 weeks earlier because she just kept pushing them away every time they tried to come and turn it back on again. And she just really fought to breathe for herself. And now she's home, but apparently she's having quite a few issues with settling into normal life because of this. I mean, it's a traumatic experience by anyone's reckoning, isn't it? So yeah, so that's where I was yesterday, finding out about the ins and outs of. But to her credit, though, she said the NHS staff were absolutely marvellous. But she also said that I made very sure to, because her sister's overweight apparently, and she was worried that they would just put her on the Liverpool Care Pathway, or what used to be called that and is now called something else. So she made sure that every day she went in, she made sure the caring team who were looking after her sister, she told them a story about her sister. So they hopefully started to relate to her sister as a person rather than just a statistic, an overweight person with pneumonia who isn't doing very well, because they twice said that she probably wouldn't make it. But she did say that they were very good carer.
Yeah, I've always had very good interactions with NHS, can't even say it.
The people
NHS.
themselves, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
that's the one. Staff, nurses, doctors, all that kind of stuff. But interesting you mentioned about these drugs and stuff that they feed them. This is not a conspiracy theory, it's just a question. But do you think that's why Boris went a bit doolally after he came out of his so-called COVID thing?
Well, it depends if he did have anything wrong with him in the first place, doesn't it? I mean, yeah, that's a.
Oh, now we're going down
I
that rabbit hole. Let's not go there.
well, I don't think he was intubated, was he? Or did they tell people he was?
I don't know.
No, I don't. I mean, it's only if you were putting on the ventilator. Well, we don't know. I mean, I know. I'm saying that I've got no idea if they give you fentanyl and ketamine for anything else that might be wrong with you. But I mean, fentanyl's so highly addictive.
Yeah.
Highly addictive. How are people supposed to come out of that and be normal for weeks afterwards?
Makes no sense, does it?
No. Okay, so we've strayed off our topic list a bit. So I don't even think we've got to your topic yet. Shall I just do a quick introduction?
Please do.
I can always chop it up and move. I can move it around. You see, I can chop it up and move it around. Okay, so I'm Nicola Cairncross. I live in Shoreham by Sea, and I grew up on the south coast. And I've always been interested in everything, nosy, some might say. I've always known I wanted to be self-employed. So from the age of about 12, I was out doing horrible jobs, but also teaching myself to sew so that I could make clothes for myself that I couldn't afford because I grew up in a working class background like yours. And then I ended up going to art college and making new romantic waistcoats for boutiques locally and putting myself through college doing that because I was a mature student. I don't know how mature you are at 21, but I was older than the other kids. So I did have some sort of semblance of a work ethic, having worked in Southern Water and hairdressers for a long time. Bought my first house at 18 with my friend Kim, who was 19, and she was a self-employed hairdresser. She had all the money and I had the job at Southern Water. So we bought a 3-bedroomed house with a dining room and a kitchen and breakfast room. So it actually slept 4 and still had a living room. Nice. And 5 if we just use the breakfast room. So we filled it full of others. Chris the Punk was a notable tenant who taught me all about David Bowie, because I knew nothing about David Bowie, but he had every single album he'd ever done. I got into that big time. But so yeah, by 23 or 4, it had gone up to. We bought it for 27,500, and by the time we sold it, about 3 or 4 years later, it had gone up to about 120,000, and now it's worth over 500,000. So that particular house in that particular road. So I got into property I first read a book. I always thought it wasn't for me because I didn't have any money. And then I read a book called Rags to Riches Through Real Estate by Russ Whitney. And he talked about how he first started buying properties no money down while he was slaughtering hogs for $5 an hour. And I thought, I wonder if you could do that in the UK. And the first thing I went out and bought was a 12-bedroom hotel, very rundown from, it turned out to be an uncle of mine, but I recognised the property when I was looking at it in the paper because my mother used to own half of it. And then an uncle who I hadn't really had much to do with my life had bought the other half off her and then turned it into a bed and breakfast, not an Airbnb, and a bed and breakfast. And he'd run it for 20 odd years and he was looking to get out. So we had a motivated seller. We had a rundown property that was structurally sound. We had the potential for a business in a freehold property. And because I'd read that book and been to several workshops like Rick Otten, We Buy Houses.
Oh.
Do you remember him? And
I'm looking forward to your next portrayal of an accent from overseas. To be fair.
And it's like singing, it sounds great in my head, and then when it comes out it's terrible, but I have a go anyway. So yeah, and I bought this property in early 2000. Yeah, it must have been 2003, I think it was. I think I've just written my memoir, so the dates are a bit more fresh. And I went to my bank manager. I put a business plan together. He said yes initially. The bank said no. We rejigged the offer and managed to buy it, with my uncle being, having half as his sort of thing that I paid him off separately to the bank.
Yeah.
And then I was already teaching people how to do things with money as I was learning, because I reached an epiphany point, really sick of being skint, sick of working hard, sick of getting nowhere, sick of always having to go and get shit jobs and not getting anywhere, because I'm an entrepreneur. I want to make things happen. I want to move fast. I want to. So the hotel was a brilliant opportunity for me. And that's one day I remember sitting in the front room of the hotel and thinking, I could combine what I'm teaching people into a program, a 1-year program, and I could have people come and have workshops at my own hotel. And that was when the Money Gym was born. And that day was a complete epiphany day. I had the idea, I worked out the details, and then I wrote an email out to my mailing list that I'd been building up since '98, email mailing list. And I sent it out, and I came back to 64 grand's worth of business, people just signing up on the spot. And that was a life changer. Well, the hotel was a life changer to start with, because it made me realize how the money system works. The same day I got a letter telling me I could have 300 grand for the mortgage on the hotel, I got a letter from Branson's Virgin credit card company saying, you can't have a credit card for £1,000. So that was interesting. So yeah, so I've been always fascinated about money, mainly because I didn't have any for a long time. And then I started to become fascinated in marketing, always been fascinated in business because I always wanted to be a self-employed business owner. And I just keep reading. I kept reading and I kept putting it into action, and life improved dramatically. And then, of course, I've had a couple of downs where my partner died suddenly, knocked me for 6, went off to live in Greece, came back after that, straight into the so-called pandemic. And it's been up and down ever since. It's really like a roller coaster, my life. But it's calmed down a lot now. So.
But also the fact that you've done all these different things gives you insight and experience that you can bring to other people's problems.
Yeah.
Because people often think that they got a problem, and actually it's a massive problem to them, but actually it's a very small problem, really, that could easily be fixed. And sometimes when you've got
often
that
by a switch in mindset.
Yeah, but also just someone else looking in that's gone through the kind of stuff that you're talking about, some of the things that I've done. You can just kind of pinpoint very quickly. It's like, oh right, you just need to change that. That's it. And sometimes it's so simple, people don't believe you, but it's like, yeah, just do that. Yeah. And then when they do it and it starts working.
Classic. I mean, often my clients become much more successful than me. I mean, I've got one client, Dodge Woodall, who he came to me when they were shutting. He runs a festival in Bournemouth. About 30,000 kids go to this festival. It's all sport in the daytime and then partying at night. And he was recommended to me by his mum, who I hadn't seen for 20 odd years. She'd been living in Thailand, but when I had the hotel, she used to come to the hotel because I used to run events there. She recommended Dodge to me in 2020 when his festival was being shut down, because nobody knew then how long this was going to go on for, and he needed to start earning because he had a team of people and a family and a house. And so we brainstormed putting together a course, and I said to him, I'll never forget, another one of those moments you never forget. I said, Dodge, you need to build an audience. He'd been off social media for a year, having a social media break. Worst possible time. I said, Dodge, you need to build an audience and you need to do it fast. How about you open your address book and start interviewing the people that you've come across in your eventful life? Because he had an eventful life. And he started his podcast, and he went live with about 8 episodes. And within about 12 weeks, he had someone on the phone to him saying, Dodge, can you help me start a podcast? And it was Harry Redknapp, who lived just down the road. And Dodge has gone on to have the last look, I think it was over 100 million views on across his social media.
Wow.
And I remember he said to me when I said, Dodge, you need to start a podcast. He said, what's a podcast, Nick? And I said, it's where you sit and talk to someone and you record it and then you turn it into something people can listen to. And he said, oh, that sounds good. So he had a very able assistant who did that for him. But 100 million views across all social media platforms is just unbelievable.
Insane.
So, yeah, so I love what I do. I've coached people around their business and their marketing since 1998. It never gets old. I just love talking business. I love talking marketing. It never gets old.
I think it's the creative streak that we kind of have that allows you to just come into a situation and just talk marketing and business, because everything is always so different. And, I'm a big proponent of the right systems and the right set of data and looking at them and seeing what you can do with them, because often people just ignore those kind of factors. But you can just...
testing is your friend, Matthew. Spit testing is your friend.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, some of it is also very much about, you've heard of Michael E. Gerber, the E-Myth Revisited.
The E-Myth Revisited,
and, it's a very popular book, but a lot of people, most people, let's face it, you've got the 80-20 rule, haven't you? People read it, very few actually implement it. But when you go and implement something like that, it means that you can actually sell it. So, the lettings business, I had a lettings business for many, many, many years and sold that last year. And part of the reason why I was able to sell it is because it did have basically standard operating procedures.
How we do it here manual.
Yeah, absolutely. But some businesses, and even if it is a one-man band, one-woman band, in order to expand and grow, you need to write some of this stuff down, because otherwise you can't even pass it on to anybody else. And I think that's another interesting point in terms of when you're talking business and property and everything generally. There's so many facets, isn't there, that you can just look at and think, well, just improving this little piece here means that bit over there doesn't get forgotten about. And it means you have less stress on yourself and you can move on to other things.
I did a How We Do It Here manual for the hotel because after about 2 or 3 years, I got bored running it myself. I actually had a manager in the early days. Then I came back with my husband and kids and lived in the hotel for a while and ran it. And then my dad said he was off to New Zealand, and he said, do you want to take a break and I'll come and run the hotel for you while I'm waiting for my visa to come through? And I knew he was a brilliant breakfast chef. He'd made breakfast for me all my life, so I knew he could do it. And he'd also run things. He'd been an operations manager for Gateway Building Society. So I knew he could run things. I knew he was energetic. He was very convivial. People loved him, and he could cook a great breakfast. So as far as I was concerned, he had the job. And I had to write a How We Do It Here manual for him. And I started by just noting down what I had to do yearly. I started with easy stuff. That's a great motto of mine, always start with easy stuff. And then I did what you have to do quarterly, what you have to do monthly, what you have to do weekly, and what you have to by then I was in the flow, and I came down to, we put red jam in blue bowls and we played jazz during the weekend for breakfast, and we play the local news station quietly in the background. So I really took it down to that level, and we had separate sheets. Every room was themed, so the cleaner had to have a list on the back of the door under the stairs to say which sheets went in which room, so that if we had to swap cleaners out quickly, they'd have something to follow. And it just made the whole thing so much easier. And the other thing I love about it is that if you've got staff and you've got a How We Do It Here manual, you don't ever have or worry about people being lazy or negligent or don't care, because you can just say to them, and I've done this many times in my management career, is you can just say to them, look, here's the How We Do It Here manual. Is there a problem with how we're doing this task, and can we make it better? Is that you haven't done it like this, so there must be a reason. Can you tell me what the problem is, or are you doing it a better way that we need to change the manual? It takes all the acrimony out of management, I find.
Management and hiring staff, the biggest head any entrepreneur can have. But that's a topic for another day.
I prefer building teams, preferably based overseas, so I don't have to actually spend any time. And then you hire a VA who creates the how we do it here manual. But I mean, it's so easy to do now. You just either record yourself doing stuff and put it in a document with a link to the video, get them to film it when they're doing it, and then writing tick lists. That's all it takes. Filming yourself and writing tick lists. We're running away with time, although I'm having a great time. Look at that. We've nearly done now. We'll do an hour and a half, shall we? Have you got time to do that?
All right, yeah. So one of my topics for this week, I think, was just about programming and how it is prevalent throughout society and in day-to-day life, and just the kind of discussion about that, and also I guess a bit of a warning in terms of people not being dragged into it, because I just find it happening more and more and more, and I've seen it happening over this last week or so, where you've got all these various different events going on globally, and you've also got events happening locally, and it's almost as though there's a number of people that are living in echo chambers where they're just seeing and hearing the same things and getting their information from the same kind of sources, whatever that may be. And as you and I both know, because we're fairly active on social media is very good at keeping showing you the things that you like seeing to keep you going and getting more of the same things that you like seeing, not necessarily challenging you. But yeah, the programming element, it's just, I've seen more and more people out and about in the streets wearing masks, which is...
Again, I can't believe it. They don't work, though.
We're in the height of summer, and yeah, I've got a little bit of a cold right now, but I think that's because I was up late last night partying, not anything else, and I do have allergies. But it's really strange. I mean, up north, there are less people wearing masks, but you still see them. You might see one every now and then in a supermarket, but
generally elderly people, isn't it?
Elderly, also Asian descent,
okay.
I would say.
They do tend to wear masks a lot in their own cities, don't they?
Yeah, which could be a pollution issue more than anything. But yeah, being in London again, it's like, woo, what is going on here? I mean, I'm sat at breakfast this morning. There's a lady going about her business, and she's got a mask on to go and get her food, and it's like, what? How are you going to get that food into you?
Well, she's going to have to take it off, isn't she? Does she feel safe when she sits down? Is it that programming that's still stuck with her, that you're okay if you're under a certain level in a room?
I don't know, but that was just one element I wanted to bring up. Another element is about, there's obviously, we in the UK have a new Labour government, and they're very gung-ho about doing certain things, let's say. And one of the big things that's happening right now is essentially the Energy Secretary has basically said, we can just cover our land with solar panels. And, I'm trying to have conversations with people and our local MPs, and we're writing a letter right now, myself and several of the other Reform UK spokespeople in my area, to our elected representatives saying, well, hang on a minute. So in Cumbria, we had been given planning permission for the first coal mine in about, I don't know how many years, 20, 25 years, to extract coal to be used for making steel. Now, last time I checked, we have an urgent need for steel in this country. We only have 2 plants that make it. Both of them, because of government intervention, are basically saying, you know what, we're just going to go somewhere else because we can't be doing with this nonsense over here. The government has decided not to defend a legal challenge to the planning permission of the mine. Basically, they're arguing it was unlawful. And because they've decided not to defend it, it started, I think, on Thursday or Friday. Effectively, it could be blocked or it could be put on hold or whatever. And you've got a Labour MP, it's a brand new MP, saying on camera to ITV, well, I never really believed in it anyhow. And, I always thought it was a bit risky. And we've got to get nuclear. We've got to get nuclear. And I'm just trying to have conversations with people to say, well, it's lovely that you think that way. And I'm a big proponent of nuclear too, because it's a very safe, clean energy source. The waste is a different thing. But in terms of the efficiency of nuclear, it's better than anything. But Rolls-Royce, who are building small nuclear modular reactors, they're not actually building them. It's a concept. They've said it's going to take at least 10 years to build these.
Yeah.
So we've got a government in power now that is basically saying, build, thousands of acres of solar panels wherever you like. And then we've got an energy secretary who's saying, we're not having this coal mine. I'm just trying to have conversations with people about what programming has led you to this insanity where you're saying, well, we can't have a coal mine that provides 500 jobs locally, which are far better paid than the jobs available, because a coal miner earns about 50 grand a year because of risk and so on and so forth, and 1,500 people in the supply chain. And you're telling me that clean, green energy is going to create 650 jobs. It's just
and provide energy within, immediately, pretty much immediately. I mean, it's got to take less to get a coal mine up and running than it has to get a nuclear reactor up and running, surely.
Well, yeah, the coal mine could be up and running this year. I mean,
yeah, because we know how to do that.
Yeah, so it's just, and the reason I brought it in terms of the programming aspect is because you can't have conversations with people about these things. As soon as you say, oh, well, coal mine, they just say, oh, no. But you can't even have a conversation about, it's like, well, hang on a minute. China, they create 30% of global emissions. US, 10% of global emissions. The UK is 1%. Don't tell me that opening up a coal mine that extracts about 3 million tonnes of coal per year to be used in steel isn't a good idea for us locally for energy security. Yeah. But you can't have conversations with people because they seem to be so programmed by the biased broadcasting corporation, as I like to call them, and other mainstream media to say, oh no, coal is bad, coal is bad. Well, it's not, because if we didn't have coal, right now I probably wouldn't even be able to talk to you because we wouldn't have electric.
I was fully programmed till 2020, to be honest. I mean, I'd read a lot of history, and we know that history's been rewritten. I hadn't got involved in any kind of politics at all. I just thought it was hopeless and useless, and they were all rubbish. I was totally and utterly programmed. I remember our mutual friend, we'll be talking about this chap a lot, I suspect, who wrote this book. It's Creating a Bug-Free Mind and Using a Bug-Free Mind. I've got this one on my desk.
We should definitely get him on as a guest, but it'll be a special 2-hour interview when we get him on.
Yeah, I've just interviewed him on my own channel, and it's been very well received because he really straight talking guy. He told me about the elections in 2020. I remember, was it 2019? Was it the last election in America? And he told me that he sat up all night. He's also really brilliant at maths. He's super good at numbers. And he sat up and he watched it all, and he said, I spotted the exact moment. And I couldn't believe that was real. I just couldn't. My programming was so strong. I couldn't believe that he was right. And that something like that, so huge, so ridiculous, so inconceivable, could happen in our world. So it really has been a real journey for me. But because I've realised I'd been pre-programmed about money and self-esteem, and that realization came in 1997. I suddenly realized that what was holding me back from being successful was what was going on in my own head, and what I'd been programmed to believe by people saying things like money doesn't grow on trees, the love of money is evil, and all that stuff. I'd been programmed by all these sayings, and I'd also been programmed that I was starting to believe there was a fatal flaw in me and my personality and my brain that was stopping me becoming successful, whereas actually it was just all the rubbish I was telling myself every day. And so I'd had that epiphany back in 97, and then everything that had happened to me since then had been a series of small growth and epiphanies as well, growth stages, and me trying, and then reading all the books I'd read between 97 and I met Andy in 2003, it must be 2004, it was the year after I bought the hotel. and he lived up the road from me. I mean, what a blooming coincidence that could be. So being around him, who thinks about everything and challenges everything and learns about everything, has opened my mind a bit more. But still, when it came to that election, and he said that, I couldn't grasp it or envisage it or hold it in my head for 1 minute. But since then, things have been so mad, and things have happened that are so demented and so counterintuitive and so anti-common sense that I've been dragged kicking and screaming into having a more rational mind. And now I'm completely, what's the word? Not isolated, yeah, completely isolated from all my friends and family, bar one, because they can't handle any of it. They don't even want to discuss the possibility, and every time I try, they shut me down.
Yeah, and I think it's a sad indictment of what's happened to society in the sense of these things are both a blessing and a curse
Yeah,
because when they introduced smartphones, effectively it was the end of one type of civilization and the beginning of another type of
I
civilization
agree.
because now it is very difficult to get through to people. And, I'm guilty of it myself because, the beauty about these little things is it is a little computer and it has all of your apps and some stuff on, but you're not engaging with the real world when you're on that thing. You're in that little microcosm of, the smartphone and all the things that goes on with it. And it makes it more difficult to have conversations because I remember having debates at school. I was in the
Yeah.
debate society, and I would be debating a point I didn't even agree with because that's what you were taught to do in debating. You have to argue for and against the point, even if you don't agree with it, to show that you can use reason,
Critical
logic,
thinking, yeah.
thinking, etc., to get a point across. And then someone else will come back with a different point of view. Then you might have some questions from the audience, and you go backwards and forwards. But nowadays, and I've heard this from some of my supporter team for Reform UK who helped with the campaign, they were telling me, people, 50s and 60s saying, I can't have a conversation with my young kids about this stuff because it's just shut down. It's like rolling of the eyes, like, oh no, not this
Oh, the
again.
rolling of the
And,
eyes, yeah.
and it's kind of like, well, A, it's so childish. There's an issue as to where's this coming from, but B, it's so also counterintuitive too, because everybody that you're in a relationship with, whether it's friends, family, siblings, daughters, parents, etc., you're generally coming to them with love. And that kind of brings me on to my second topic of the week, which was The Power by Rhonda Byrne, because it's just epic. But I had to be reminded of that lesson again because you are coming to them with love and you're basically wanting to protect them and help them. Hence why
Yeah.
you're asking these questions and almost challenging them because you want to help them. So when people are just shutting you down,
It's not, it's worse than that, Matthew. It's not even they shut you down, it's that they then revile you and they avoid you. And it's like you, by trying to help them or share some information or that might save their lives, actually, let's be frank. I mean, they'd revile you for it. And you end up not getting invited to things. They end up crossing the street to avoid you. I mean, I'm not saying that's happened in my family necessarily, but I am only welcome at family events if I promise not to talk about stuff, anything. And it's not just like one topic, it's everything I'm not allowed to talk about. And funny enough, my previous podcast partner, Judith, woke up earlier than I did. And in fact, I thought she was going around the bend, to be honest, when she started talking about some of the stuff she was talking about. And I was worried, and I suppose that's why what people think about me now. So she woke up earlier and she said to me, I can't bear to do this podcast anymore because we're talking about such superficial things and you're bringing all your incorrect programming to the table. I can't bear to listen to it anymore. So that's why we had to stop our last podcast.
I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? And people are at different stages of, and I hate using the word journey, but it seems that everyone likes to use it nowadays. But they are at different stages in their evolution, I guess, in the sense of what they are doing. And the book that you shared earlier by Andy, Using and Creating a Bug-Free Mind, 2 books. The detail it goes into in there shows that all of us at some way in shape are programmed by certain things. We just are. It's like
you can't help it. Your parents program you like they were programmed.
Yeah, but also there's certain things that we do that we're programmed to do, like brushing our teeth, driving from here
that's a good one, though, isn't it?
It is, but just because
until you realise that you're brushing your teeth with fluoride that has been actually introduced into the toothpaste system to not only get rid of a byproduct of oil production, but actually puts things into your brain that dumbs you down and stops you asking questions. Hilarious.
Yeah, and now I'm thinking, damn, I need to go and check what toothpaste I'm using now.
But I've gone back. I've gone back to Utimol. I've tried to make a lot of little changes that are not going to change my life too much. I've stopped using seed oils. I only use olive oil or a decent oil or butter to cook with. I don't have fluoride in my toothpaste. I've started taking a load of supplements, and I've never done any of this, and I've never cared about any of this, and I feel so much better. I can't tell you. My brain fog has completely gone. I was wallowing in brain fog, and now it's gone. So obviously there's something in this toothpaste thing. Anyway, before we scare off the rest of the audience.
Yeah, the last point I was just going to end up with on programming is, for everyone out there listening or watching or however this is going to be presented, I think it's really a case of understanding and accepting that we are programmed. And then I think it's really down to the individual to decide, well, do I want to be programmed in everything, or do I want to start asking questions and seeking alternatives? Because for some people, and I would classify at least 80% of the population, it's fine for them to be programmed. They're always going to be programmed, and they're happy being programmed. Yeah. And we can start delving down into all kinds of little rabbit holes about things like mortgages and debt slaves and this, that, and the other. But my point is, for that 20% that may be listening to this and thinking, well, yeah, there's certain things I think I do need to think about and challenge myself on, I'd suggest that the key way to start doing it, maybe slowly, is start opening yourself up to alternative avenues and stopping doing certain things. So the first thing to do in terms of stopping is, in my opinion, stopping reading and watching and listening to the news. Now, and by that I mean mainstream media, BBC,
BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Sky.
I think it's fine to say, on Apple, you can get Apple News and you can get updates, and maybe, at the top of the hour on radio, you get like 4 things that are going on. That's kind of fine in terms of, well, this might be happening. But, watching the BBC News at 6 o'clock for a half an hour, it's just programming. Going and buying the newspaper, it's all just programming. And just by stopping those 2 things, just makes your brain expand a bit more and think more about things, and not just accept the narrative they're trying to tell you. So, for instance, as a prime example of programming, you look a couple of days before the election what the newspapers were saying on the front of their newspapers, which was basically, Labour's going to win, Labour's going to win, Labour's going to win. Pretty much every paper. So Labour won, because people are programmed to think, oh, well, there's no point in me voting for anyone else because they're already going to win anyhow. I've been told this. So
52% turnout, was it? Which means half the country didn't bother?
Yeah, it was a low turnout. But so I'm just saying that I think stopping doing some things is a really good thing to do. And then if you are interested in exploring more, and you've got to do this in small doses, but I believe one of the best routes to market in terms of just expanding your awareness more about what is going on is actually X.
Oh, just about to say that. It's the only place to get your news.
Yeah. It's the
Twitter we're talking about for the...
I'm so happy Elon Musk took it over, because I just love the guy. He just says whatever he wants to say.
There is still censorship on Twitter. They call it free speech, but not reach. In that, if you say stuff that Elon doesn't like, or the the management still don't. I've still got an account banned. I haven't been able to get back, even though, I was only talking about stuff that was factually true back in 2020. Lost my big account. But they basically allow you to say what you like, but it doesn't get any reach. But it's still the best place, because if a topic gets enough attention, it will go to the top of the algorithms there, regardless of what the management at Twitter X think about it.
Yeah, and I think also because you've got so many, let's call them citizen journalists now out there doing stuff, that there is some good commentary out there. There's some good people sharing stuff on things like Substack, etc. And
Substack's a place for written stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it just gets you into a different way of thinking and challenging.
And read the comments as well. Don't just read the posts, read the comments, because the comments will give you a really, okay, there are a lot of bots in the comments. You've got to remember a lot of these things aren't real, but there are actually enough people in the comments giving different viewpoints that enables you to think, okay, perhaps I need to think about that differently, or perhaps I need to read a bit more about that, or whatever. Cool. Yeah, no, I was going to say the only place for news is X. I don't watch any other news, and then often you'll get taken off to Substack or YouTube for a more deeper depth on things. I mean, I'm not spending all my time doing this, by the way. This is just as much as any other people spend. As much as my ex-husband watches the BBC, I'm on Twitter. So cool. Well, let me do one of my topics then. My topic is Neil Oliver's an interesting case, because he completely wasn't down any rabbit holes at all up until 2020, but I think he is fully up to speed now with what's going on in the world, and he has the advantage of being able to speak to experts. He's interviewed a lot of experts on his GB News show. He's got a podcast. I'm on his Patreon account because we get stuff behind the scenes there. And watching him coming up to speed on what's going on has been interesting. And he's just put out a video on YouTube called Evil is Walking Among Us. And I think he's come to the point now where he's realised it's a spiritual battle of some kind. And I'm speaking as a confirmed atheist for most of my life. In fact, when I was about 8 or 9, I stood in assembly and I wouldn't say the Lord's Prayer and I wouldn't sing the hymns. And when they asked me why not, I said, because I don't believe in it. They said, well, okay, but you've still got to go to assembly. I said, I'll go, and I won't make a fuss. I'll just I'll put my head down, but I'm not praying, and I won't sing, but I won't make a fuss. And so ever since then, I've been an atheist, mainly because I didn't want to depend, having had quite a tumultuous childhood and not had much control over things when I was a child. I wanted to have control over things as an adult. I didn't want to put my trust or faith or depend on anything else outside myself. I wanted to only depend on inside. So that led me to atheism. And it was only really in 2020 that I've started to become more spiritual, because and Neil Oliver summed up what I felt when he was on the Tucker Carlson show just recently. And he said, I came to realize that for this much evil to be happening in the world, there had to be an opposite force for good. He goes into it quite a lot on his video, Evil Walking Among Us, but I also recommend the Tucker interview. And that's where I'm at. I mean, do you feel that there is evil walking among us and evil being done, or do you feel that it is literally just incompetent people who are out for themselves doing these things to us?
I mean, when you consider the insanity of things that are going on in the world, and as you say, you talk about things that are not common sense that are happening, you have to ask yourself, well, why is that happening? And for what reason is it happening? And did they really think this through? And, whether you believe in a universal being, God, whatever it is, or not, there are interesting references to be made back to what is going on, particularly in the book of Revelations, which is the last book in the New Testament about the end of times and what goes on there. And a lot of the things it talks about are happening and have been happening.
Floods and famine and pestilence, those kind of things. War, the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Yeah, precisely. And At the same time, though, because of things that we talked about earlier in the program, such as the Tartarian Empire, which seems to have vanished, and other things, we obviously don't know at what stage things have happened already. And we've already been through this, and we've come through this, and we've come out the other end, and we're going into another one. So it's
How
quite
many
difficult.
end of times can we have?
Well,
Perhaps it's every time there's a cycle. Is it the fourth turning kind of cycle?
or a reset or whatever it may be that they talk about. I don't know, but certainly there seems to be at this moment in time a lot of billionaires with far too much money that think they can interfere in the Earth's ecosystem for reasons that will only make them money. Because let's face it, they're not interested in anything else. I don't really care what anybody says. I have yet to see any real evidence of someone really at that level of wealth. Billionaires, I'm talking about, not necessarily millionaires. I think there are some decent millionaires, but billionaires who aren't doing things for basically
The good of
I mean,
humanity.
yeah. Well, I've yet to see a billionaire not doing something that they want no return on. They're just putting it out there. It's almost like a gratitude for being where they are. All they're about is how can they further improve their power, influence, money for something else. And don't get me wrong, happy for someone to put comments in about billionaires that are doing the right thing, but I
Well,
see
you could
very
argue that Elon's one because although I regard him as a kind of Lockie character, I don't think he's all good, and I don't think he's all evil. I think he flirts with either side, but he's generally coming down on the side of good in the terms of free speech for sure. But
yeah,
he's a
but you
billionaire, and if he didn't have the money, he wouldn't have been able to do all that, would he?
sure, but then you've got to question, well, if you are a billionaire and you own the biggest free speech to market platform in the world, there's a reason why you do that. That's just me
Even
being
given its
cynic.
limitations.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree with what Neil Oliver's saying. I think it's almost, there's so many rabbit holes you can go down with in terms of what's going on in Europe, what's going on in the West, and there are some really bad things happening, and there doesn't seem to be very strong leadership emanating from anywhere really, apart from a couple of places which we're apparently not allowed to talk about.
Yeah, we've got to be careful on YouTube, haven't we? But just for the going forward thing, if ever we do stray into topics that I think YouTube might not like, I'll just either edit them out or I will put the rest of it onto somewhere like Rumble, the first 20 minutes on here. But I'd like to keep it that we can carry on talking on here. So do you want to go for another couple of topics and then we'll wrap up? So what's your next one?
You have to come back to me. I did have one, but it's gone.
Okay, so my second topic is when you think about this week, the attempted assassination of Trump, which people are going backwards and forwards on, and the jury's still out for me on that. But the other big topic of the week, which literally happened yesterday, or was on a Friday, is the cyber attack. That's just global cyber attack. Well, look, they don't know if it's a cyber attack or if it's basically it's a company called CrowdStrike, who are owned by some very suspicious people, and they supply the security for Windows products. And apparently the whole world runs on Windows. There's been a massive outage this week, yesterday and today, and planes are still grounded. Apparently all the cash point machines in the world run on Windows XP. They haven't been upgraded, and it would cost too much to do it. And every single affected computer that's got the blue screen of death has to manually go into its files and delete a file in order to reinstate the computer's ability to work again. Oh, and guess what number that file is? It's file 33, which is a number beloved of Freemasons everywhere. So that's a bit suspicious as well. But it's going to take a while to get back to normal, apparently. And they've been talking about cyber attacks and being the next thing. And do you know what really gets to me is how bloody predictable all this is? I mean, back in 2020, I think it was Mike Yeadon laid out a list of the things that were going to happen next, right up and including a fake alien invasion, which is the one I'm really waiting for. But every single thing that has happened to us since 2020, I think it was Mike Eden laid it out in a timeline of when it was going to happen, in which order. And we're pretty much sticking to it. And it just is, it's simultaneously so shocking and so boring at the same time for me. So what do you think about the whole, the cyber attack scenario? Is this the big one we've been waiting for? Are they going to bring down the whole internet? Are they going to bring in the CBDCs and digital IDs to get us back online? Or is this just a dress rehearsal?
I mean, at some level, it just smacks of utter incompetence, doesn't it? But then at another level, you think, well, could just been a really knocked off employee that thought, you know what, I'm going to mess these people
How
up.
can the whole world's infrastructures be dependent on one person clicking one key?
Well, from my understanding of what I've looked at briefly, it's to do with corporate. It's basically to do with corporate firewalls, isn't it? So it's not affecting home PCs per se, but it's affecting all the corporate people that have bought into a product.
It will affect home PCs if they reboot, if they turn their computer off and reboot, apparently, because a lot of personal security people, like my friend who's got a guy who looks after his IT, he got an email yesterday saying, for God's sake, do not turn your computer off and turn it on again, because it might come back with this update that's going to stop it working.
Well, I have a Mac, so I really don't care about
me.
Windows.
Proper grown-up computers.
Special little people we are. But anyhow, that's 80% of the world. But anyhow, so your question is this a conspiracy that's happening?
No, I was sorry, I forgot to give you my resource, because I do like to give people resources, and the resource for this question is Maneco 64, which is MANECO 64. He's a very down-to-earth character his name's Mario, and he comes from Italy originally, but hasn't lived in England and worked in the city. So he's got a very good insight into how this will be affecting the banks and the insurance companies and the pension companies behind the scenes. And he says, is it the big one that everyone's been predicting, or is it just a dress rehearsal, or is it just sheer incompetence?
It's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because it to me, I always think back to in these kind of situations, I think back to Goldfinger, the classic James Bond movie.
Okay.
About
you might have to remind me.
It's basically there's the South African guy, and he's going to basically get all the gold from Fort Knox, and then he's going to make all the other gold radioactive and this, that, and the other. The thing I always think about is this, and there are other films that you could probably look at that have got similar kind of plot lines in, but he brings all the people together from the different areas, from Asia, from Europe, from wherever, and there's always one that dissents, sometimes two. There's always one or two that they don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. So when you kind of think about a global level conspiracy, I kind of think, well, is it that? Because, you're talking about so many companies, so many different entities, and most of those want to make money, and they want to keep their jobs as well. And the CEOs and the board members definitely don't want this kind of nonsense going on, because they want stability and they want to make sure that their stock price isn't affected. So at some level, I think it's just a complete and utter cock-up again.
Because that supermarket in Australia who's gone completely cash-free were totally unable to take money yesterday because they couldn't even open the tills.
I don't know, but I would think there's going to be more of these coming in, and all it's going to illustrate really is the interconnectivity of the system and how fragile it is and how it really needs sorting out, because it's not been sorted out. And also highlight, although this will take ages to come out because no one wants to talk about it, the fact that pretty much all of the systems that we're running are legacy systems from the 50s and the 60s that are built on such old code that most of the people that built them are dead, and the language that they used isn't used anymore, and no one knows how to change it. So I can guarantee there'll be so many national infrastructures, such as the national grid and things like that are run on systems that no one even knows how to change or update it anymore. No one has a clue, but they don't want to tell anyone that, because then the
No.
general public will get extremely scared and worried about, well, what's going to happen? And this is one of the issues I have generally with politics globally, is there is no transparency and no accountability. And if only there was, if only there were, then I think people will be a lot happier to say, well, look, we have a problem. Let's bring the best people we can together to try and fix it, and let's be honest about it.
Let's
But they don't want to
bring
do
the
that.
best people in to tap the pipes.
Yeah, they don't want to do that. They just want to
Yeah.
make up nonsense and just put it under the carpet. And then when you have the utter depravity of that COVID inquiry report that came out the other day, I mean, I just raised my eyebrows and wonder what's coming on with the world.
Yeah, I went to the local bank hub because they've opened, so few banks in the area now that they've opened a bank hub on my high street, which is manned by different banks every day, and you can go in and get cash and put cash in, and you can do other banking things. But I went in to get some cash, and it's annoying because they haven't got a cash machine in there. You have to actually go to the counter and talk to the person. And I said to her, so your computer's running then? Because a lot of banks were affected globally. And she said, oh, no, everything's fine. And I said, so you've not been affected by this out? She said, she didn't even know anything about it. And I got some cash out just in case. And then the chap behind me came in. He was like a sort of tradey type. And he said, I've come in to get some cash because all the banks are crashing. And so word was getting out on the street that something was going on. But the woman behind the counter knew absolutely nothing about it. And what they don't realise is that if a lot of people get spooked about cash and everyone goes in to get some cash out at once, the system will completely fall over. And I'm sure that's what Manico64 will be talking about in his video he just put out this morning. So if you do want to know a bit more about the repercussions of what might happen, and Andy, our friend Andy, talks all the time about unintended consequences, doesn't he? Of this thing breaking, you've got no idea that thing is going to break afterwards.
Yeah, because you don't know what systems have been shut down because of this that may take months to come back online again.
Yeah. You haven't done your second topic. Have you found it?
Well, my second topic was really just about the fact that I'd been doing some kind of mindset reset just to kind of get back in the swing of things and focus on what to do. And
yeah, because you've been through a really intense period, and you at some one point it looked like you were going to be, the whole party was going to be more successful than it was. I mean, it was incredibly successful, but it didn't achieve the big goal that everyone was hoping for. But so you've had to readjust yourself from working flat out all the hours that God sends, and now suddenly you didn't get the result you were hoping for, but now you've got to pick yourself up and pull yourself together and work out what to do next, haven't you?
Yeah, precisely. So yeah, I spent quite a bit of time this week thinking about things and looking at almost visioning, what the future needs to look like in terms of what I'd like it to look like. And then I got back into The Power by Rhonda Byrne, which is...
I don't know this one.
So I think it's the second book. I don't know if it's the second or the third, I'm not sure, but someone recommended it to me who, I know is, another very successful entrepreneur, and just said, look, this book's really good just for re-galvanizing you, and, you listen to it and half an hour, you're just like, good to go. It's that good. So I don't have an Audible account right now, so I just went on YouTube, and obviously most things are on YouTube. Not all of it's on YouTube, but for those people,
the highlights.
There's a guy, and this is the wonders of the internet, isn't it? There's a guy that basically is an American, and he does readings from books. He's called like Sacred Scripts or something. I'll get you if you want to put it on here so we can share it. Yeah. He basically did readings from books, and it's loads of different books, but he did do 2 half-hour slots of The Power, which is only about half the book, but he's got a nice voice. You can listen to it with music or listen to it just with rain in the background. So I've been listening to it in the car, and it's just a really good, powerful message, which is, as I said earlier, we can choose to basically do the things that we love, or we can choose not to do the things that we love. And everything we put out into the world is either love or not love. And it's just a really interesting concept and way of looking at things. And, I think Andy touches about this in some of his writings as well. But just the way this is articulated and the examples used, it is very powerful in terms of re-energizing yourself and thinking, well, yeah, if I'm going out into the world today and I'm basically pushing out love to people like me, and that's just being kind and positive, then I will be attracting that back into my life for sure, as opposed to, having an argument or this, that, and the other, which there's just no point in doing because you're just going to get arguments and stuff happening back. So, given some of the issues I've been facing with other pesky people in my life, I thought, well, I'm going to go and give that a go. And I've basically committed to listening to this for at least the next 90 days. I'm not going to listen to the whole book, obviously, every day, but I'm going to listen to a snippet every day just to re-energize and to get back into thinking that way. Because, as I say, and you've already indicated, doing that campaign in a short period of time is just, it's very intensive and it didn't really give you much scope to do anything else. So I'd recommend anybody that's kind of not quite where they want to be right now, but know that they've got it in them to be where they want to be, to just maybe give it a listen on YouTube because it's free. And if you like it, then you can go and buy it. I mean, I've got the book itself, but I just find listening to it is also really powerful.
I remember when I was trying to change my life just after that epiphany I talked about, I was listening to, somebody gave me a few cassette tapes. It was an older gentleman who I met at BNI, and he gave me a load of his old cassettes. And in those days, cars had cassettes players. And I listened to You Can Take Yourself to the Top. Who was that? That was a very famous motivational speaker and salesperson.
Zig Ziglar or someone.
That's it, Zig Ziglar, absolutely. And I listened to so much Zig Ziglar. I listened to Jack Black, Mindstore. I listened to some of the big marketing people whose names completely escape me right now, but who've written great marketing books. And I've got to say, driving around, listening to positive material like that, it really does set you up, doesn't it? It makes you feel so much better. Yeah, that's why I've got Andy's book at the side, because the minute I feel a negative thought, I'll just open it at random and just read a bit, and it reminds me that it's all up to what's going on up here, all of it, everything. Right. Okay, well, I think that's been absolutely brilliant. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I hope you have. We can do it regularly.
It's been very interesting. Very interesting.
All right, well, we'll do that then. So if everyone watching is going to like and subscribe, whatever we put this out on, I think we're going to start a brand new podcast with this on YouTube. And I've got an idea for the name, so we'll talk about that in a minute after we've stopped recording. Do subscribe and do comment and do let us know what you'd like us to discuss next time. We're very open to new ideas about topics, aren't we?
Absolutely. And a final thought or question I had for you was, and I don't know if you want to record this or not, but whatever.
Okay. Well, I can chop it out if not. We haven't talked about what we're going to be doing next week either. We need to do that, a quick roundup of what we're doing.
Well, the thing I wanted to just ask is, if you're out there right now and wanting to find a podcast or look for a podcast, who is it that we're looking to attract, and why should you listen to us?
Well, I'll tell you who I listen to, and that might help the algorithm, because if I put in the description here who we listen to, our recommended resources that we talked about through this show, that will tell YouTube who our audience is. So I listen to people I listen to the Delling Pod. I like interview podcasts. I listen to Joe Rogan. I listen to DarkHorse Podcast with Brett Weinstein and Heather Haying. I listened to a great one last night. Who was that? Danny Jones. I've just got into Danny Jones recently. He's interviewing a lot of very, very interesting people at the moment. So I'm listening to people who are interviewing interesting people. What about you?
Well, that's really interesting, because I don't listen to any of those podcasts at all, which means that my list is going to be different to your list.
That's good.
So, who have I got on my...
I mean, as I say, on YouTube, I watch a lot of homesteading things, people building farms, people building lifestyles, alternative lifestyles. And I also watch things like Barry Stepp and Caspersite, who round up from TikTok all the best alien and paranormal videos. So I've got a wide ranging, as well as Neil Oliver, of course.
Well, on my podcast list currently, I've got the Tim Ferris show, which I've been listening to forever and a day, and I always found that really interesting. I also listen to, every now and then, I just tap into people like Jay Abraham, Gary V, Modern
Love
Mindset.
Gary V, love Jay Abraham.
Modern Mindset with Adam Cox is quite interesting. Occasionally, I've been on his show once or twice. That was quite good.
Oh, I like Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson as well.
Yeah,
have you listened to any of that?
I always like James Schramko. He's pretty cool.
Yeah, he was my coach for 3 years.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy. But yeah, often on podcasts, I just find that I just go in and just look for a topic and then just listen to something, but I don't necessarily always go and listen to everything that the person does.
No, you've got to dip in and out. That's the point of it, isn't it?
I think it differs. But who would you say we should be? I mean, if you're someone that's looking for a podcast, who should be listening to this podcast? Do you think it's?
I think the people who used to go to Radio 4 who've become disillusioned with, or suspect they're not being told the 100% truth, and that certain topics are being avoided, and that certain sides of certain arguments are not being put forward. People who are disillusioned with the mainstream media, people who do listen to people like Neil Oliver, and Mhayar Tousi is doing a great news show on YouTube that's growing very, very fast. So, people who are exploring listening to alternative sources of their news. I think anyone who is looking who feels isolated, who feels they can't talk to people around them, people who listen to Katie Hopkins, perhaps, and people who listen to June Slater as well. Yeah. People who listen to ordinary people giving their opinions about things that are going on in the world, and about how that's affecting them personally, and who feel alone.
There you go then. That's it, folks. If that's you, listen.
Cool. So what are you up to this week then? What you got planned?
This week coming up, it's going to be really a mixture of continuing on with the mindset stuff I've talked about, but also I have got some focused attention needs putting onto property that needs renting out quickly. Just for ease of time and use, I'm going to be donning my gloves and doing a bit of a quick redecoration on a property, which I don't mind doing, but it just means it's quicker than getting a contractor in. Because, I don't know about you, but finding a good contractor is literally like finding a needle in a haystack nowadays. Yeah. It's so hard. And finding a contractor is easy. Finding a good one who is reliable and reasonable. You can find reliable and totally ludicrously expensive, and you can find unreliable and reasonable, but finding reliable and reasonable is very difficult.
Well, that's the old triangle, isn't it? It's cheap, quick, and good. You can't have all three. You can only have two of the three.
Yes, precisely. So that's gonna take a bit of time up, and I also have a big supporter celebration from the campaign that we ran for Reform UK up in Penrith Solway. So I've got about 35 people coming to a little event just for some drinks.
Awesome. Now, remember what we talked about was sponsored by your B&B, remember? That would be a good opportunity to get your B&B name in front of 30 odd people who already are well disposed towards you.
Okay, yeah.
That's something to think about. Yeah.
Will do.
Well, I'm going to have my brain expanded big time this week, whether I like it or not. I'm trying to learn how to use chatbot messengers. So I'm coming to the conclusion that, well, I watch my family and nobody's using email. It's only the older people like us that are using email nowadays. So in order to keep my marketing tuition and mentoring relevant, I need to master chatbots. It's not a skill set that comes, because basically it's when someone responds to one of your things on Facebook, you can get your chatbot to reply to the people.
Yeah.
And you can actually train the chat. Now AI is going on. You can actually train the chatbot to reply in your style and have the resources that you've got. So I would upload my book, my marketing book. I would upload some of my blog posts. I would upload some of the transcriptions of my videos, and I could train the AI to talk like me and to have the resources that I've got by reading my books. So it's never going to be as good as me, but it would be a long way towards personalizing a chatbot, to make customer service better, to make them able to recommend which of my products and services would be best for them, and all that stuff. So, but it's not, as I say, it's not a skill set that comes easily to me because it's very detail orientated. But what I'm doing is I'm getting ChatGPT to map out the branches of what I need to do in the chatbot. I'm already boring you. I can see that.
No. I like you had something flash up on my screen. I was thinking, what's that going on?
I thought I was already boring you, because I can get a bit boring about techie stuff. And the other thing I'm doing is I'm starting some marketing for my Bitcoin options client, who has come back to me after writing a book. A lot of my clients have written books, and they're often about quite esoteric topics. So we're going to have a discussion about how he could market his book, because the publishers do absolutely no marketing at all for authors whatsoever. So the authors have to do their own marketing nowadays. Yeah, you can do affiliate marketing with books. The thing to do is to have a product to offer on the back end. But the tricky thing is to get people to come from your book to your website. And the best way to do that is to offer them a free gift in the book. And then that brings them from the book to your website. They put the name and email in. Authors can build up a mailing list then. And obviously, the next step from that will be to build up a page on Facebook where people can interact via your chatbot messenger. So yeah, my brain is going to be fully expanded this week. But let's hope for some good weather, eh? Don't get started on that topic now.
The weather is all real.
Well, we'll talk about that another time, I'm sure.
All right.
Thanks very much, Matthew. It's brilliant to talk to you. I've really enjoyed it. And,